Twitter criticism. Yesterday I didn't read too much. I just read one news from Brazil 24/7. Today is Tuesday, and we are reading Al Jazeera genocide. We are reading something from economy on Al Jazeera. Nobody can deny that China is a powerful country now. The only question is China able to defeat the US and the West as a whole? Is China capable of... Anyway, let's read the economy. No, look at this.
EU trade ministers had to agree on the list of US products.
No, I'm not going to see the video, the stream, but Brussels pushes for trade talks with Washington while preparing countermeasures on tariffs. The EU is doing countermeasures also, as everybody could expect. Who knows, In the end, if you match the reciprocal tariffs, if you match them, what's going to happen is there will be no tariffs, because the tariffs, who knows? I guess only the weak always suffer. And the weak will... I'm not sure about the economy, but that's it. It's like fiction, because let's say you have a trade of $3 and $3, and then someone says no, now it's $4, and the other part says, oh, I'm going to ask $4 too. So that perfect change, nothing happens. I'm going to read this one now. Wall Street opens higher as US-China ratchets up war of words over tariffs. Markets recover some of... just one second. Markets recover some of historic losses recorded after US President Donald Trump unveiled wide-ranging tariffs. By Edna Mohamed and Masiar Motamedi. They write about everything, not just about I don't know, but not about genocide. And here we go. April 8th, 2025. Markets in the United States open higher, recovering some of their heavy losses after President Donald Trump announces sweeping tariffs. China has pledged to, quote-unquote, fight to the end if there is a trade war after Trump threatened to further increase tariffs in Beijing if Beijing does not withdraw retaliatory levies of 34% of US goods. The question is, I was thinking with myself, and Russia maybe will team up with the West, with EU, or maybe with the US. Russia started talks with the US, and there's no forever friends, as Wang Yi said. That's the question. Wang Yi really said that they won't be friends forever with Russia. I don't say China is a really good friend. I guess they are, because of too many things. Chinese people created everything in ancient history, like everything. Glass, for example. They created glass. So everything is thanks to China. in our material story. But the question is, geopolitics is all about opium war. Geopolitics is all about greed. Everybody is greed. I am greed. People out there are greed too. If it will be a good business to break China down again, don't think twice. It is what China will do. So I guess Wang Ji is such a nice guy. I like him. I like Chinese people, but I have to remember that maybe Russia, maybe it's going to be a good move for the US to be partner of Russia to defeat China. Why not? Who knows? Well, this postmodern world is all about nuclear wars, and that's why everybody's crazy. We have nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs, nukes, but some people don't have lunch. We are not talking about free lunch. We're talking about free bombs, understand? Free nuclear bombs. That's the world we live in. But I'm going to read the summary of because I never read these live updates. The live updates about how to say this. This is trade war, yeah. Trade war live updates. Latest hour on Al Jazeera. I definitely support free lunch for everybody, not free nuclear bombs. You have to make choice in life, whether you prefer free lunch or free destruction, free nuclear bombs. I'm always stand by free lunch. And says, markets in the United States open higher, recovering some of their heavy losses after President Donald Trump announced sweeping tariffs. China has pledged to, quote unquote, oh my god, it's being hard. You cannot touch sweep upward this page. China has pledged to fight to the end if there is a trade war after Trump threatened to further increase tariffs if Beijing does not withdraw retaliatory reliefs of 34% on U.S. goods. U.S. Treasury Secretary accuses China of "quote unquote" escalation. Claims it made a big "quote unquote" a big mistake in announcing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. imports. Quote that third or four. U.S. Treasury Secretary accuses China of "quote unquote" escalation. Claims it made a big mistake in announcing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. imports. Well, now we can see clearly. We can clearly see who is the enemy of the U.S. The Communist Party of China, definitely. And that's why the Chinese Communist Party, the Communist Party of China, is so good. It's so conscient, it's so nice with everybody. I guess, my opinion. Markets in Asia rally slightly after a turbulent day, with indices in China, Japan, Hong Kong, and South Korea rising. European stocks open higher after the European Union signals its willingness to negotiate a tariff-free trade pact with the US. And that's it. 3 minutes ago, Wednesday, April 8th, conflicting narratives from the White House make for unclear future by Shiham Ratansi. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been speaking in the past few hours about the tariffs. He's being widely reported to be concealing the White House about an endgame for the tariffs and trying to cool the fears of the markets. He's been giving interviews talking about how how up to 70 countries have not gotten in touch with Washington to talk about a possible deal, and that seems to have had a relatively calming effect in Wall Street. But we always have the same problem with conflicting narratives. While Bassan is talking about the possibility of deals, Trump is also discussing the tariffs staying for a long time. And then there are real tariff hardliners like Councilor Peter Navarro, and core advisor Stephen Miller, saying this is about reshaping U.S. trade for good and bringing back manufacturing and revenue streams. So no one entirely knows what this all means going forward, especially with the war of words ratcheting up with China. War of words. That's funny, but because it's true, you know. Just 1 second. Just 1 second, I'm sending a message here. Um, 13 minutes ago, April 8th. China requests consultations on Trump's tariffs. WTO, World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization, WTO, says China has requested dispute consultations with the US due to Trump's quote-unquote reciprocal tariffs. In the request, China has argued that the US measures were inconsistent with its obligations under the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, 1994, the Agreement on Customs Valuation, and the Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures. The request for a dispute consultation allows WTO parties to discuss the issue and find a solution. If 60 days pass and consultations have failed to resolve the dispute, the complaint can request a legal ruling by a panel. The development comes after China said earlier it will not back down and will quote-unquote fight to the end, after Trump threatened to increase tariffs unless Beijing withdrew its retaliation tax on US goods on Friday. And 23 minutes ago, 23 minutes ago, UK EU concerned about cheap goods flooding market. Stunning growth. Cheap goods flooding market. You know what I guess is that China can survive not only with Russia militarily, but with everybody, like countries like Chile, any country. They can keep producing everything. I just saw this one of these cars has a tire that says, a wheel that says designed by Japan. The question is, this is not made in Japan, it's made in China. Everything is made in China. So how is going to be, Japan are producing in China, but Japan is producing in China. They cannot stop producing in China. I guess this is very tricky. I guess China will not. The tendency is that the trend is China will not allow Japan to produce in China anymore. If Japan only team up with the US, understand how is the situation of the economy in the world. Well, anyway, UK EU concerned about cheap goods flooding market, stunning growth, by Milena Vasilinovich. Veselinovic. That's better because Vaselinovic. Let me tell you about Spanish. Vaselina. The European Commission appears to have taken a tougher stance on the U.S. tariffs than the UK, where there hasn't been much talks. And there's a new live update where there hasn't been much talk of retaliation. Britain instead has been trying to get a trade deal with the US. So far, there has been no success on that front. But one thing that the UK and the EU are both quite afraid of is cheap goods that were destined to go from China to the US ended up flooding their markets. Why will that be bad? Well, initially it will be cheaper for consumers, but in the long run, it will dent local businesses, lead to job losses, and could result in stunted economic growth. So, to that end, EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen spoke on the phone with the Chinese Premier Li Qiang, asking him to de-escalate the trade war with the US and to try to bring some more stability to the markets. There's a photograph, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer on the right with the European Commission President von der Leyen in London on March 2nd. I'm going to read the new live update. A few seconds ago, April 8, US prioritizing allies in trade talks, Hassett. We have some comments from Kevin Hassett, a White House economic advisor. Yeah, that's the trend. And let's say, for example, Chile, it was got tariffs of 10%, but this country is not doing great. You know, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of crime, and 10% of tariffs. I'm not sure how many people will die because of that. But definitely it's a bad news for Chile. Even 10%, even 1% tariff, I guess. So, but question is, Chile it always was an ally of the US. Not me, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I'm not a Chinese citizen living in China, having a good time. Quote, the president will decide when and if to talk with China, end quote. He said in an interview with Fox News, quote, but right now we have received the instruction to prioritize our allies and our trading partners like Japan and Korea and others like Chile. But you know, Chile is absolutely ridiculous. We only produce grapes and wine and copper, and that's it. So we are not properly a nation. You know, this society is too unequal, and people hate each other, and there's no nation. As we previously reported, Trump earlier argued that in social media posts that China wants to make a deal, quote-unquote, badly. Quote, but they don't know how to get it started. We are waiting for their call. It will happen, Trump said. Anyway, as I read these conflicting narratives from the White House make for unclear future. And what else? South Korea, quote unquote, many others wish to make tariffs deals. So